You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, People Centric leaders. We are excited to talk about today's episode, and we're going to, you know what? Scratch that. Delete. Okay, we're ready to start over. Hey, People Centric leaders. If you've been following the headlines like a lot of us have, you're seeing Boeing back in the news, and we fly a lot, guys. We fly a lot, and we sit in planes, and Matt and I had an experience recently sitting in the exit row of a Boeing 737. And I was sitting on the left side of the plane and right on the exit row, right next to that door. And I opened up a news site. I think it was ABC News or something. I was just checking news on my phone. And they had a picture of the exact same plane that I was sitting on, that Matt and I were sitting on, same colors on the seats, exactly the same seat insert pocket things. And with the picture of the door that was next to me blown out on that flight where they had forgotten to bolt in a section of the plane and a door flew off of the side in mid-flight, sucking the shirt off of the person sitting behind it. Actually sucked their shirt off of them and their shoes and socks, I heard too. And it creating terror amongst the people on the plane. And so now Boeing, obviously they have had some trouble in the past. They had some those Max 737s that were they had a problem, and they went back and they said they didn't know exactly what the problem was, but they actually did know what the problem was, and the government fined them $2 billion. Now they're back in the news again for violating some of the terms of their agreement, and they might have some criminal prosecution against them, all these different things. So our team was talking a little bit about this, and it started making us think a little bit of what is the purpose of business? Like, is Boeing out there, or do the Boeings of the world truly just exist for profit? Is it just about the profit? And most of us don't work for the Boeings of the world. Most of us work for smaller businesses or even nonprofits or just any organization. Like, what is the purpose of business overall? Is it profit? Is it quality? Is it people? All those different things. So whether you work inside of an organization or you work as a leader of an organization, or if you even own an organization, we thought this topic would be interesting to you. So we're going to get philosophical today and talk a little bit about what's the purpose of business. So we have some of our team members here today. We have Philip Herzog is with us. Philip, say a few words so that people can recognize your voice if they are listening to us on the podcast.
This is what my voice sounds like. But because, my name is Philip and we're talking about philosophy, I could just say, what is a voice? What is sound? But this is my voice. And that's the last thing I'll say that's so philosophical.
Philosophical.
Philosophical. I was waiting for somebody to go there. Philosophical.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you. I'm going to start signing my emails this way.
He's being philosophical. Yeah. Thank you, Diana, for pointing that out. We have Diana Royalty here with us as well.
Hello.
Diana, you brought this topic to our attention. Like, what are you seeing? Like, what's your interest in this topic?
I don't know. I think it's just crazy that we have these corporations that millions of people trust to do a job, and really, like, they've kind of failed, but in their eyes, it's not failure, right? And I don't see them really working really hard to not fail. Like, it just seems totally crazy to me. So I just thought it was interesting to chat about a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about a really stark example when I used to work for a big company, a big Fortune 500 company. We'll just call it 3M because that's the name of the company. And they had changed their payment terms. At the time, they were net 30 on payment terms, which means literally if you invoice them for something that you did work. So if you get hired by 3M to do some work, you're not an employee, but you're a contractor, and you submit your invoice to get paid, 3M is going to wait 30 days before they pay you. Well, while I was there, they changed that to 60 days. And they said they're going to wait 60 days. They're going to wait an additional 30 days. So literally, they could pay you. They've got the money to pay you right away, but they're going to hold the money for 60 days. And the reason they're going to hold it for 60 days is because they can hold that money, stick it in the bank, and get interest on it. That's why. So every time they increased it from by 30 days, when you're talking about that much money, it was millions of dollars in interest that they were going to add one time to the company coffers. Well, I've heard that since then they've even changed it now to net 90 or even higher at different times. Well, as an engineer working with contractors, sometimes we were hiring smaller contractors on site who can't wait 60 days to get paid for their money, especially if they're buying stuff for 3M that they're going to get reimbursed for. So they're laying out cash for these big companies. And so I was approaching, our purchasing department saying, I don't think this is right for a lot of these. Like a lot of these companies, we're threatening putting them out of business because of all of this. And they said, when you're talking about millions of dollars, it's all about the money. We do what we do. And if those smaller contractors can't keep up with us, then maybe larger ones can, and maybe they'll come work for us. We're in the business to make money. That's who we are, and that's what we're supposed to do. And so it's okay for us to do some things that maybe don't feel as right. So that's going to be the topic for today. We also have Matt Griswold. Matt Griswold has also worked for big companies. We won't name your company unless you want to.
That's JP Morgan. Yeah.
Never heard of it?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and now when you just kind of tied a bow on that conversation, like, no, we're supposed to make money. That's what we're here for. And this is going to lead us kind of into that conversation anyway, where I assume you're the one leading us here. But this part of that conversation is like, yeah, and how you do it kind of matters at the same time, or if you do it well, right? It's almost like tell your sister you're sorry, like sorry, like I did it, but no, that's the wrong attitude, right? That was the wrong way to do it. Be genuine. And sometimes I think, and we were talking about this ahead of time too. Sometimes for those larger organizations, larger corporations, it's not necessarily that person's fault. They're a part of a bigger ecosystem, as you like to talk about there, where decisions are being made for them and everything is just kind of rolling downhill. Again, a lot of our clients that we work with and support and cheer on and all those things, they're not necessarily a part of a larger huge ecosystem where they are able to kind of ebb and flow. And you can have these conversations with your managerial team or your administration team saying, yes, we want to make money, but what do we stand for and how do we go about making the money? How do we want to treat people while we're making money? And what does that look like? And so anyway, that's going to be part of this conversation too. Happy to be here, everybody. Matt Griswold.
Matt Griswold. It looked like you were going to drop your mic and just walk away there for a second, but he's not. He's going to hang around for the rest of the conversation.
I'll stick it out.
Yeah, he'll stick it out. All right. So let's start really basic. Let's start about like, why do companies exist? Let's start from there. Why do companies exist?
I mean, if we're talking about like from a purely business school standpoint, it's to make profit for shareholders. That's the goal. I know, I'm sorry.
Imagine Diana coming down on that side of it. Not providing the service for the people that could potentially use it.
No.
We want your money.
That is from a purely business school standpoint, it is to maximize profits for shareholders.
Oh, maximizing profits for shareholders.
Yeah.
I like that you said that. It's not just profits for shareholders, it's maximizing profits for shareholders.
Squeezing the people for all they have. Got it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about then, does everybody agree? Philip, do you agree with that the purpose of companies is to maximize profits for shareholders?
I think that's the purpose of some companies, is to maximize profits for shareholders. What I think that definition misses, and Diana has an MBA and is very powerful, so I challenge her carefully. This is important. That's why I'm speaking up. No, she is amazing, and I'm sure does not agree with that definition. The thinking of the majority of businesses in the United States that do not actually have shareholders, right? Maybe it's an owner, one or two, or it's very small businesses. And so I think that it may be true for some, but even greater, and I think Matt touched on this too, if that's the only thing you're focused on, then you will continue to have problems like Boeing, where someone was rushed to do a job and they were scared to say that something was wrong and we can't slow things down. And the CEO being interrogated essentially says, you know what, this was a mistake and I'm so sorry, but there's no like follow up next other than just we'll try harder. I think for most companies, the impact is we really want to do something that we love, and that is something that can serve the world. And this is a team of people we have through it. So I would say my word when I think of business is to create something meaningful, and then also help a team flourish. That's how I would define the purpose of a business.
Yeah. Wrong, Philip. That's not true.
I lost points for that, dang it. Oh, man.
Oh,
That's definitely not what we do at People Centric.
Yeah. We're all about the profit for the shareholder. That's what we do. We're trying to make you guys exist to make me money. That's what we're here for. That's the purpose.
we know.
That's
So
why
sad.
you have so much now. That's why you fly as an admiral, and can avoid Boeing because we have done our job.
Yeah,
think.
I don't like to I don't like to flaunt this around a lot, but we are platinum status on American Airlines. So it is pretty sweet. It's nice work if you can get it. That's what I'm trying to say. It's really, really good. Now, so we're using some examples here in terms of business, and I think we're seeing kind of a dichotomy. Like if it's to maximize profits for shareholders or owners, we'll kind of broaden that shareholder. An owner is a shareholder, right? So even a small business, you have a shareholder, right? Even a nonprofit, if you throw that in, if you're listening and you're part of a nonprofit, the worst name ever created, I think, was nonprofit, because nonprofits still need to make profit.
Nonprofit is a tax status, not a business strategy.
Yeah.
Nonprofit is a tax status. That my husband works in healthcare, has worked in nonprofit his whole career. And guess what every financial meeting is about? Profit. Like, it does not mean that they are not talking about making profit. They always are.
Which they quickly
Nonprofit
give
is
back to all of their patients, right? They give all that money
incorrect.
back. Incorrect.
Incorrect.
Okay. All right. Well, just checking.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so maybe it would be good for us. So two different directions I think we could take here. One is to talk a little bit about like what is profit and where does it really go? I think that's one thing that we could talk a little bit about just in terms of business. And we've talked about, our partnership and our work with a great game of business and opening up financials and trying to understand things. So maybe that we'll do that a little bit in the spirit. And let's start with that. And then second of all, I think we can talk a little bit about like, what do we do for profit? Are we willing to do anything for profit? Because some of the examples we've used are clearly icky. We talked a little bit before we jumped on about like Facebook, inspired their media platform created a genocide in Myanmar. Like they are clearly doing some things that have for profit that have created that most people would not be willing to do. But there's decisions like, are we willing to lay people off to maintain profit, or are we willing to not pay people as much in order to make a profit? So there's going to be decisions like that. But let's go back to talk about profit. Like, where does profit go?
One of this reminds me of a meeting that you had with an organization, and we won't say the name of the organization, but this is an interesting concept here. Whenever the administration team or the executive team is talking about, we're going to have X amount of profit this year, and it was, in the millions of dollars. So you can understand it's going to be a little thin year. We might be having to lay people off, and this is where maybe the crux of that comes down to where with that lack of transparency, just a little bit, the people that we're trusting to help us reach all that profit might not have a reason why we're needing to reach that profit in the first place. And Don, I may be butchering the story, but I think that's where you stopped and said, whoa, wait a second. Is anyone confused why we need so much profit? And we're also we're talking about also having to lay people off at the same time. And I don't want to go to the kicker there, and you can tie a bow on the story after, whenever I'm through, but they said, oh, let me explain what that means. We also have capital improvements that need to be done. Like, what happens if a large piece of equipment goes out and we weren't saving some profit? We weren't making enough money to be able to create a profit, to be able to save a profit, to then be able to buy that large piece of machinery. And so they weren't saying because we just need to load the safe and continue to stack it with the profits that we're making. We're saying we realize one day we might not be as profitable, and we're still going to have to be able to survive and buy equipment too. So again, I might not have done that story justice, but that's what that question that you just asked reminded me of.
No, it was an interesting meeting because they had basically announced, hey, we're going to have, and I'll make up numbers, we're going to have $5 million in profit. That's what our financials are. So it's going to be tight and we may need to do layoffs. And I was just watching the faces of the people in the room going like, wait, where's the $5 million going? That seems like a lot of money. Like just looking around the room, if we divide up $5 million amongst just the people in this room, like I would think we could, or just amongst the employees, why are we laying people off? And the answer was exactly what Matt had said, is that organization recognized something in financial terms, it's called depreciation. It's that they had equipment that was going to break down over time. It was going to take time, and someday they're going to have to replace that equipment. So you could be profitable as an organization every single year. And if you don't save enough money to buy that piece of equipment, it's gonna go down in flames. I mean, imagine like if you started a lemonade stand, but you had your lemonade machine cost you $100,000, and let's say you made $1,000 a year on your lemonade stand. You're like, well, I'm making $1,000 in profit every year. That's pretty good for a lemonade stand. But then 10 years later, your lemonade stand machine goes broke and you have to fix it. So it's going to be $100,000. Well, you've only made $10,000 over the last 10 years. You don't have enough money to buy that lemonade stand. You don't even have enough money to borrow money for that lemonade stand. Boom, your business is out. So I think that the first understanding is that some profit needs to go for future things that you're going to buy, right? That you're going to need to buy. So it goes towards expenses. So that's a big piece of it. So it's easy to look at a P&L and think, oh, wow, you're making a lot of profit. But that profit, you may not be making as much profit as you think you are. The word profit is a funny word in accounting. It means a lot of different things. Where else does the profit go?
Into the pockets of the owners.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then it's used to buy airline status. That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, it does. Let's talk about like a small business. So like we're a small business and I am the sole owner of People Centric. So you're right. When we make a profit, if there's money left over after we buy everything, then that money is mine. And actually, if you are not a C Corp, if you're an S Corp, I know we're getting a little technical here, but that money, if the company makes the money, the companies don't pay taxes. Small businesses don't pay taxes. The owners of the small businesses pay taxes. So if we make money, the government considers that I'm taking the money, whether I'm taking it or not. So you're right. That does go into my pocket if I want it to go into my pocket. So does all the money go into Don's pocket, or how would I make those choices?
All of the money does not go into Don's pocket. Most of it does not go into Don's pocket. Sorry, bud. Most of it doesn't.
So sad.
Yeah, it's very sad for you.
Yeah, most of it goes to Diana. She's the middle person before she cut. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. A lot of that profit, though, you have to be able to reinvest back into the business, right? A lot of that profit you're going to be able to put back into the business to be able to improve the business or improve the lives of the people that are in the business, improve the technology within the business. Like you're making, I gotta push it forward. It's almost like the equating Don, you and I've talked about this. Like if you're a homeowner, it's like, do we have some money left over to be able to I don't have to rebuy the house, but I do need to work on the house maybe a little bit as I go. We're replacing the floors, are we updating the countertops, are we going to paint the cabinets, whatever it is that you're going to do, replace the roof, I need to potentially do that. And so if you do have some money left over, I don't have to rebuy the business, I don't have to rebuy the house, but I do need to keep up and continue to make improvements and on the house. And then I think we would take that a little bit differently. And I just kind of snuck that in there, but improving the lives of the people that you're trusting to help you accomplish the tasks, right? Because if I'm only focused on profit and not the people or the quality that the people are living in, right? The thing that it is that we've built where I now have people that are there, I've got to continually look to improve that as well. And Diana, you do this for us a lot too, from like a benefit standpoint. We're constantly checking to see, is there a better way or a more robust way that we could take, if we do have a little bit of profit or whatever that looks like, is there a way that we can use this to be able to improve the lives of the people that we're choosing to build this team with? Because if we improve the lives of the people that we're choosing to build the team with, then we're probably going to get more production or more engagement out of the people that we're doing this thing called life with. So anyway, long answer to say, I think a lot of that profit does need to maybe re-energize back into the business that you've created.
With that too, yeah, I was thinking I think the difference is between shareholders and stakeholders. I love as a team that Don Harkey owes People Centric because it shapes how People Centric works. And it's true of any business, right? The owner is going to shape how it runs, how it works. When I was at Liberty Mutual, it was very different in that, like it's not a small business. It was massive. And one of the very first things I learned when I joined is that the CEO, who worked his way up from being a janitor all the way up to the top, very cool story, but redid his office recently for $8 million, right? That as an intern coming in, that was it. David Long's office is so impressive and big. It's 6.5 million. He has his own private gym and he never uses it. Poor David. So when I finally met him at some summit, they took all these, interns to. It was cool, but very unimpressive and unmeaningful because for me, it was just this massive company where profit was the focus. And to keep you focused on profit, they would pay you a ton of money to sell things that no one cared about. Like no one I worked with really loved what they sold. Great people, and they're still doing a great job, but it just wasn't for me. But so again, just kind of that difference of, I think when you're a stakeholder and you feel like you personally put a stake into what you're doing, then that also makes a difference. So to Matt's point, profit goes and it helps us as stakeholders, it helps Don as shareholder, and then it also goes to build people-centric more so we can continue making a difference for our clients and our community. And so I think that's a great example of what business is meant to do.
So like I like what you both said there, because there's choices that you make with the profit. There's choices that somebody makes with the profit. In a corporation standpoint, it's not the shareholders that get to choose where the profit goes. It's the executives that get to choose where the profit goes. So in those big companies, yeah, the executives make a different set of decisions. And I would always argue that I think those big corporations are not very capitalistic. They're not very free market because they have so many layers between the executives and the people and the shareholders. I don't think the shareholders know what those decisions are. I'll bet those shareholders didn't know that they spent $8 million on an office. Also, fun exercise later. I'm going to try to imagine what an $8 million office would look like just for me. I'm just going to think about that for that'll be a fun exercise, just sitting down. I'm going to jump on Amazon and see what I can get for $8
We'll
million.
add that to our strategic plan. We'll have the nicest office in Springfield.
It will be very, very nice. Yeah. So as you make those choices, you make choices that sometimes you just think about the shareholders and you can take all of the profit. And we've worked for organizations, small ones, big ones, where the owners zero out the profits every year, where they literally say, okay, well, the profit, we're just going to redistribute it all to the owners. And that's what you get. And then they invest very little into the company over time. We've also worked with companies where the owners invest everything back into the company over time. They put everything back into it. So there's different decisions that are made by the owner in terms of profit on what they can do with that. And I guess the question that I'm going to ask as an answer to that is there a consequence? Because Philip, I was thinking about like when I was at 3M, the CEO of 3M, who later became the CEO of Boeing, side note, just throwing that out there, had a project that he was going to upgrade security at his house. And it was, I won't say what the number is, but it was a really, really, really big number. And I remember the engineers looking at that number, laughing, saying, are we installing Patriot missile batteries out in his lawn? Like what kind of, this house can now sustain like a direct attack by like all but 3 countries in the world. Like anybody can go try to take this house. And it's like, yeah, that definitely carried through to morale. So is there a consequence with badly spending and badly investing profit?
I would say yes, like one, financially. And the financials are so important. I think we work with lots of company owners. When we talk to them, you hear they have years where they take very little, sometimes nothing, stints where a lot of them took nothing. And so that's a choice with the profit. But when you see, I think that's something for a team, when you see that dynamic where, yeah, I think you start to put together, why are we working so hard when a company's focus is on profit, profit, profit? If there's a poster in the break room, minimize expenses, and then you hear about a new jet purchase for the company or some elaborate office. These are not inherently bad things either. Have a jet, have an office. But when I think the message to you, employee, work hard, cut more, but then you see this manifestation at the top of, we will have everything we want and we need. I mean, that story may not be true all the way through, but I think it's that perception, especially, which is why this talk about profit is so important. And I think we find a lot of companies, different sizes, maybe a few people understand what their profits are and what they go to, but I would say a lot of people don't. And that's a different topic, maybe for a different time. But having employees that are engaged to know, at least in general, what the profits are for, I think that helps paint a better story too of like, oh, this is what we're doing, and that's how it's then used.
Yeah, I've heard this rhetoric in a lot of businesses lately of like, oh, we're just gonna have to do more with less, right? We have to cut some spending. No one's getting assistance anymore. We just have to do more with less. And my thing is like, that's okay. Sure, that's a time. But if you're looking at the top and saying they don't have to do more with less, then I think that's where it starts to like get in people's heads and get people thinking like, what am I really doing this for? And is it worth it for me to be kind of living paycheck to paycheck while this person has a $8 million office or whatever it may be? I think it plants the seed in your head that you're not as valuable as the executives, but you're the ones doing and executing the work. And so I think then it starts to get people thinking of like, what is the point of this? Why am I here?
So I think the question, if I was sitting, I imagine the executive sitting in the $8 million office would say over a drink in a moment of vulnerability, saying, I know that a lot of people didn't like that I took this, but I still am in an $8 million office now. Like, like it's still awesome. Like I'm still being successful. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I make the company a lot more money than that. And so it's all worth it for me. Does it hurt the organization? Does it hurt the company when profits are spent like that? If we completely ignore employees and we do things that are, I'll say evil, I'll just say it evil. Like I do things that are icky. Maybe we'll say icky and maybe we'll back off of that a little bit. Does it hurt the company at the end of the day? Financially, does it hurt the company?
I mean, I don't know which direction you're going with this, but in my mind, the long run would say, yeah. Like if you're doing some things that are icky, that if you're a large corporation, you're Don Hark, you're reading about them in the news, then you do your best to avoid the company. Then yeah, ultimately that's gonna have an impact on the company. And I think the other thing too, if you're only focused on that, then the employees that are so engaged in working so hard for you are going to start working maybe not as hard or become a little bit disengaged or just start going through the motions or find another place to work. And those are the ones that we're in front of at these conferences talking quite a bit about. Those are the ones that aren't going to survive in the long run. So yeah, I think there's a bigger implication there.
I think when you're making decisions and it's literally just all about the money, yeah, that would definitely lead to disengagement. And maybe, and I don't know David Long personally. I'm not good friends with him, but at this thing, they fly us all to Boston, all these interns, and I'm front row in the room, and he walked in, and he seems disengaged is just the perfect word. Like this is your future talent for your entire company, and he was just like talking very monotone and like had a bunch of people walking with him, his entourage. So my genius little question, 17-year-old, 18-year-old Philip, however old I was, I'm like, hey, Mr. Long, what is your job as CEO? What's your motivation as CEO? And he was like, I just hire smarter people than me to run everything. And he gestured around, and maybe it was sincere, maybe not. I don't know. But had no demonstrated passion in that moment for, again, like what this is other than a machine to create profit. And again, profit is a good thing, but I think it totally sent me in a totally different direction. So at least I'm thankful they were honest about it. But yeah, it has a negative effect for sure.
I think what we're saying, which I think is kind of weird in the business community, is that the philosophy of only making profit and only focusing on profit is not good for profit. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if Boeing had, let's say, Don, you talk about this a little bit, how Boeing used to be like an engineering focused organization. And so they were creating top of the line aircraft, and people saw the value and they bought that. They're like, that's great. I will spend the money for a Boeing airliner, right? And now I think people are, I mean, I don't buy planes, but if I were, I would not be looking at Boeing to buy my plane, right? I would be like, who else is making these babies? Because I don't really want that thing. And so yeah, I think not only does it affect the marketing and the branding and the like idea behind the product, but I think it affects the people who are making the product too. And when those people start to say like, well, these yahoos at the top don't care, why should I care? Then you have a huge problem. Then it's like your manufacturing sucks, your product sucks, your culture sucks. Like nobody wants to work here, nobody wants to do this. So then, yes, eventually your profits are going to go down because of all of those things.
Yeah, I think about like when I was at 3M, that CEO who I'm talking about, Jim McNerney is his name, James W. McNerney. W. James McNerney, I think, is the way actually he does it. It's that starts the W, and went to Boeing afterwards. He came on site, and I'll never forget the story. It's the only time he's ever been was at our plant location. And I wasn't there for this, but I heard this from several other people that they brought Panera in for lunch. And so they brought in all these boxes, and it was just like the sandwich boxes that Panera has. You pick the box, and it's different types of sandwiches and all of this stuff. And he said, "Well, I'm going to go wash my hands." And so he walked out of the conference room, and his entourage people, who were all executive vice presidents and people high up in the company, jumped up and were like slapping people's hands from taking the boxes. And they had this whole discussion about which one was he going to want. Which box is he going to want? And they've told everybody, like, wait, everybody don't get that. And so they were opening boxes up, and they were assembling like the perfect box for him. Like, oh, he likes this type of chips. He wants this kind of sandwich. He wants this kind of thing. And he built it all into one box, customized box for him. So that when he walked back in, they handed him the box, and then everybody else got whatever was left, which were all these sandwiches that had just been handled and stuck into other boxes and mismatched and all this other stuff. And I can remember that, like, that team that was there in the room, not only did they talk about it, they talked about it with a lot of people outside the room. That story became kind of legendary. It creates lower engagement for sure. You're like, that's the leader of the company and a whole bunch of vice presidents, and they just acted like, I don't know how to even describe that behavior. Like they were falling all over themselves in like pure fear of just like making this one person happy who was working on stuff. He was asking questions on the tour that showed that he really didn't understand things that were going on in there and making bad decisions. And look at, did that have a long-term impact on 3M? When he ran 3M at that time, 3M was considered like a gold standard company that was like at the top of its game at that time. I would argue that today it is absolutely not. And there are parts of 3M that have been publicly talking about bankruptcy over lawsuits of different things that have happened. And I think that's what happens when you get disengaged employees over time, is you start to see the unethical behavior start to pop up. You start to see bad decisions start to pop up. You start to see employees who see those situations start to let their people hang themselves. And I think so when you act evil or you do icky things as a company, it does have a negative impact on profit. But go ahead, Diana.
Well, I think in that kind of instance, those things are person centric, not people centric, right? We have decided that we are going to hang our hats on this one thing, this one person, this one focus, and really you're shooting yourself in the foot. That just, to me, it's like so obvious. And I guess maybe we've worked with enough executives for me to be able to say those executives are not smarter than you. They're not smarter than the people doing the work. They're not gods that need to be fed the right exact sandwich. They're just people. They're exactly like everybody else in the company. They've just somehow gotten to the top through whatever work they could do. But to me, that is such a great example of like a person-centric thinking instead of a people-centric thinking.
And I always like to think that he would have been horrified to know that they did that.
I hope so.
I like to think that. I don't know that I believe that, but I would like to think that. I think what's really neat as we talk about a people-centric company, and you've heard all of these episodes of this podcast and things we talk about, I think sometimes people come to us and say, well, the core of business is to make money. And so this people-centric approach is like a counterculture. Like you're going to go against this profit. Like, okay, well, maybe I'll sacrifice some of my profit for my people. But that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is the people-centric approach is the most profitable approach. It's the way, if you inspire engagement, there are very, very few things. Gallup just came out again with the state of the global workforce report, and they show again the impact on profitability on key performance indicators. And it's double-digit percentage increases in things like profit. It's over a 20% boost in profit if you increase your engagement levels from the bottom quartile to the top quartile. And we see that consistently with the organizations we work on. The organizations that are thinking about the people and thinking about balancing good, not just for how they take care of their people, but how they take care of their vendors and their customers and the people that they work with. If they think about it in terms of a people-centric approach, they make more money. Like they're actually more profitable. Let's circle back into the ownership thing for businesses, because I think there's something we left out there that some small business owners especially are probably going like, well, wait a minute. We talked about for profit that, we've kind of indicated that sometimes business owners don't make a lot of money because they reinvest money back in. But sometimes business owners do make a lot of money. Like there's times where even for People Centric, where I've made quite a bit of money, I've done really, really, really well. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, is that okay? Like, should I get a good payday every once in a while? Like, is that bad? And this is a weird conversation because all three of you work for me. And I'm going to guess all three of you are going to be like, yeah, Don, that's terrible. We're actually really pissed off whenever you pay yourself good money.
I, for one, am outraged and cannot believe that you have paid yourself. I think I can talk to this a little bit because, well, I've been there the whole time and I've seen some of those decisions happen. So I will talk about that. So I think what you're talking about is every now and then you take a draw from the company for something, right? And it's usually a pretty big draw. And it's for a reason. We've talked about it, whatever. But I think looking at those decisions and saying, yeah, it's probably okay for you to do that. It's because in years prior, you made no paycheck. Your pay gets cut first, right? If there's things that we need or the company needs, or there's a global freaking pandemic, your pay gets cut first. We also know that you invested a lot of money to get the business started. So I don't know if I should say this, but like you invested your own money early on to get the business going, which means your 401k was depleted, or you put a second mortgage on your house, or whatever that looks like for a small business. You took that risk and you took that pain for us, that financial hit. And so now you're kind of making some of that back up. The time value of money would say that you are not making that up well, but you're making it up now. So I think in a small business, yes, it is okay to make those decisions. You just do so consciously and know that like the past has worked against you a little bit, and now you're making up for that in the future when you can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think you have to think of the whole story, right? There are small business owners that we've worked with that I know that have taken what I consider to be too much out of the business and not given enough of it back to the team. I like what Matt said is that, the team should feel the growth in the business. If the business is becoming more and more profitable, the team should feel that too. Like we should work to make sure the quality of the work is really well, that people are compensated fairly and that they get good benefits and that they have a good work environment and things like that. I always recommend to owners, as you're growing and your profits going up, that you continue to reinvest back into your team over time so that they feel that success as well. I think that's really, really important. But yeah, if you're an employee and, I've heard various stories of people kind of hearing or seeing an owner like, oh, you just took a bunch of money out of the business and you bought a house or you bought a car or you did something with that. I always ask the question of going back and saying like, what's the whole story? What's the whole story? Especially if that owner bootstrapped that business. They started off making, next to nothing or negative money and pouring money into it. And maybe they're making up for that later. Like there's lots of reasons for that, for all those different things. Now I'm going to flip that around and say, if you're an owner, like, yes, it's good if you're making a lot of money and that's really good. But the question is, can you look at your people in the face and tell the story? Whether you would or you wouldn't, there's different discussions about being transparent or not. If you can look at your people in the face and say, yeah, I would be happy to share the whole story from beginning to end and still feel pretty good about it, then I would say you're probably making pretty good decisions. I'm not saying you should do that. Side note, I don't think that you need to be careful. We talk about like transparency and financials and things like that. You need to be careful about that. It's not financial transparencies, it's transparency in the story that really benefits the employees. If you just suddenly start showing your financials, they're just getting a snapshot, and then it's hard for people to understand on those numbers, and all they see are really big numbers, and it looks like you're doing bad things. But if you're afraid that your employees are going to discover that you're doing something evil, then stop it. That's kind of my take on all of that. So yeah.
So as an employee, like if you're kind of sitting back and you're listening to this episode and you're like, great, I know my company makes a lot of profit. I'm scraping by here. I can see that my owner lives fine. Is there something that you can do about that as an employee? Is there something that they could help get them past this feeling of like inequity?
I think a couple thoughts. I mean, you guys add to it for sure. One is that what you think is inequitable may not be as inequitable as you think it is. So I'll say that. Like if you look at the numbers, you may not understand them fully. And I'll give you the example that Matt brought up before, which is an organization we work with. I get it. Like if you say, oh, we're going to only make $5 million this year, and so we're going to have to do pay cuts or layoffs, that sounds awful. Like if people don't understand the context of that. So it may be that your owners or your business is not doing a good job of sharing context. You may not understand it. So one thing you can do is ask questions. And I would not approach that of saying, why do you make so much money? Or why is this happening for you? That kind of stuff. But I would approach it as saying, hey, I'm trying to understand the business a little bit more so as I can help make good decisions along the way. I think the other piece of that is if you are digging deep into things and you are finding out that there's some icky things that are going on and you don't like the way that your company is treating people from the outside or the inside, or you work for the corporation that you just feel icky about, the best thing that you can do is go find another job. That's the best thing you can go do. Leave those organizations, make them suffer, make them pay for that. That's how organizations start treating their people better, is when it's financially, when it's very clearly going to impact their bottom line. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is this perfect storm where we're in a labor shortage right now. And we are actually in a position where this people centric philosophy is not just like, I can do it if I want to. 10 years ago, people talked about turnover and it had a big cost to the turnover and put out those numbers, but nobody really believed it because you could get away with it. You could get away with not having it. Today, you can't get away with it. And that's what the near future is going to bring, is that businesses can't get away with that high turnover of people who feel like their companies are doing something bad. You can leave that company and go work for somebody else. And that's what I think is going to change that. And I think that is going to very visibly show companies that you can't be evil. You can't do the things that are bad and be profitable long term. I think it's better long term to take care of your people, to be people centric, to think about how people work, not just the people that work for you, but the people that you work with, also the vendors, the customers, everybody across the board. So I don't know if anybody would add anything to that.
I think you have to be comfortable to ask the initial question. So to Diana's point, if I'm just, an employee, just an employee, quote unquote, and I'm working for the company and I have some questions, hopefully you feel like you're in a safe place where you can ask those questions and have a conversation. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the answer, but at least if you have some psychological safety there to be able to ask the question. If you're an owner, hopefully you've created an environment where people feel safe to be able to come to you and ask those types of questions as well. We're not saying, like Don said, you have to open up all the books, but if you feel like, I tell my kids this all the time, everybody has choices, right? So employee, if you ask the question and you feel like you don't like the answer, then make a choice, right? You have a choice. The owner has a choice as well. So yeah, if I feel like I don't like the answer, then I can decide whether or not I would like to continue to work there or not. So I'm glad you went there, Don. That'll make our conversation easier this afternoon. Anyway.
Perfect. It'll be a short conversation, Matt. Meet me in the parking lot. We'll have a great conversation. That'll be great.
Right.
Yeah. I think the punchline of all of this is that we believe and have seen, and the research supports, and the science supports, and the engineering supports, that being people-centric is not a sacrifice for a business. You're not sacrificing things for your people. What you're doing is you're taking your most expensive asset and your most valuable asset, which are the people that work for you, and you are taking care of them, and you are maximizing them in a way where they feel good about their jobs, which in turn actually does turn into more profit long-term, more success for the company. Also, we're not saying that if you own a business that you don't deserve to make lots of money. You put a lot of risk into it. You deserve to make lots of money. You deserve to be wildly successful. The tip is just make sure that you're also bringing your people along with that. Make sure that they feel that success as well, which also means, by the way, that they should also feel when things are struggling. We did that during the pandemic. We were very transparent and showed, hey, this is scary. We lost 30% of our clients in a week. And we got all of them back, within a few months, but it was really scary for a short period of time. And we shared that pain, and everybody took a little bit of a hit along with that. So I think that we want to make sure that you're sharing your success with your employees along the way, and so that they feel good, and make sure you're sharing the story of how the business runs. And if your story is icky, stop it. Stop it. Don't do that. And if you work for a really big corporation, those big executives at the top, they don't own in many cases, they don't own the company. I mean, they're shareholders just like the employees are. They're just making a big money. It's a different beast. That's not what I think of when I think about like business. And I know people talk about like capitalism, and the first thing they go is talk about those big corporations. Those big corporations, that's a different kind of a game. Most of us don't work for those companies. Most of us work for smaller businesses, smaller organizations. And that's the ones we really, really are talking about. Although the big ones that are wildly successful, the ones that do more of the right things more than the wrong over time. And nobody's big enough, too big to fail by doing bad things. And there's countless examples of that, of companies that you'd never see go away, that went away because they were not people centric, because they were person centric. People got greedy and they invested too much money in themselves, and they cut their money, they cut their checks and ran and laughed all the way to the bank, and you worked for them. But there's a lot more examples of companies that do the right things, where people are engaged and they're excited about what they do, and they're doing great things in the world, and those companies make more money long term for everybody. So people centric, it's a good thing. We want that. We're in favor. We're pro people centric. That's good. It was a risky episode today. I thought it was interesting because we do get that question a lot of like, should we sacrifice for our people? And we say, no. What you need to do is treat your people in a way that they sacrifice for you. And that tends to turn around, and that makes people more money. That makes companies more money. And that's all good. So the right thing to do is the right thing to do. That's the punchline. So thanks a lot for joining us on this episode. It was fun. And we are approaching here our 200th episode. We're super excited about it. Our team's working hard. We've got fire breathers. We've got sword swallowers. Oh, Diana, no, we're canceling that.
We do have all of that. It just won't be on our YouTube portion. It'll just be audio only. So
that will probably that will be a lesser effect, but yeah, listen.
You hear a lot of ooh, wow. Oh, that hurts. That's unbelievable. Just follow along.
It'll be great.
Podcast juggling. Watch this. Check this out. Whoa.
Amazing.
That's incredible. He's juggling his desk. This is so good. This is so good. All right. Well, we'll catch you next time on the People Centric Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.